hut allon di wikets edia. Naidili detla we ohe hut allon wikets edia. Hut allon tsedi de aya wetsedi. Willon hui letson atsedi. Hwad ahwa. You see that whole bunch of, it looks like an island? Those trees right there, that was an island. They said that all in this area, it was like a blue blanket on each side of the river. That was blueberries. They had tons of blueberries here, all over this way, over that way. So it was just beautiful here until they did this. Look at this. Oh my gosh. It's awful. Dirty. Stinks. I don't think we realize how big of a problem it was until recently. They were start talking about the storage of arsenic underground, and we never knew how dangerous it was or what they were actually doing here. The arsenic that they left behind, which is stored underground, is probably the size of, it's a 10-story building, and 7 of those buildings. That's how much is stored underground. But that's a lot of arsenic. We could probably kill the whole world a few times over. They're trying to figure out what to do with it, and it is here forever, and can't seem to imagine that forever, you know. What about my goodness, our future generations is going to be left with this? And even in the beginning, when they were starting to mine the area, they've never ever consulted the people. They've never said anything to the people that this is what they're doing and this is how they're taking it out and this is what's been left behind. Only after the fact that they had left that we're starting to find these things out, and it's awful. It's never good.
The giant mine at Yellowknife goes down 750 feet. There are a number of processes, all equally important, and the actual mining of the rock is only the first. The ore now starts its journey through the surface plant. It falls down into a breaker that pounds the rock down to the size of small stones. After crushing, the ore is sifted through vibrating screens, oversize being returned automatically. Finally, the ore reaches the mill and is poured into huge bins. A complicated process is required to extract the metal from the rock. From the bin, the ore is drawn through a massive ball mill where it is ground to a powder. From here, in the form of a heavy gray pulp, it is pumped to another part of the mill for chemical treatment. From the reagent floor, various reagents are introduced to start a process of separation. Beside the roaster is the Cottrell plant. 75,000 volts are used here to recover the arsenic from the roaster fumes for safe disposal.
My name is Kevin O'Reilly, and I moved to Yellowknife in 1985. I was on City Council here from 1997 to 2006. And that was a period when Giant Mine went into receivership. Since then, I've worked for a variety of federal, territorial, nonprofit organizations, and my work on Giant Mine now is currently with Alternatives North. Well, Giant Mine, there was mineral exploration in the area in the 1930s, but they figured there was something there, but it became an operating mine in 1948, and it was a gold roasting operation. It finally closed in 1999 when it went into receivership. That was the end of the mine. What we have left on this site is 100 buildings. There's a number of tailings ponds. There's 95 hectares. But of course, the big legacy is the 237,000 tons of of arsenic trioxide that is stored underground, and it's in 15 old mined out stopes, as they call them, chambers. To put that into perspective, that's 7.5 times the size of a 10-story building. So it's a lot of arsenic trioxide. It's probably enough to kill all the humans on the planet a couple of times over, so it's a lot of toxic material.
Part of removing the gold involved a processing that released the arsenic that was already in the rock. The arsenic that was in the rock wasn't going anywhere or interacting with anyone, but when it was released in processing, it became a powdered form that was highly water soluble.
So arsenic trioxide, it's a proven human carcinogen. It's a non-threshold carcinogen, which means any exposure is not good. And it's also highly soluble in water. We know that water is getting into the mine now and starting to dissolve away some of that arsenic trioxide that's stored underground. But the water does go down into the bottom of the mine where it's stored. It's pumped up above ground and treated, but there's certainly a lot there underground, and if there was a catastrophic release, it would not be a pretty sight. So we don't want that to ever happen.
Underground, in a number of underground chambers and mined out stopes, there's 237,000 tons of arsenic trioxide. There's also arsenopyrite in tailings. So that's in processed tailings. That's on the surface, spread over an area of over 200 football fields, as deep as 70 feet thick. There are 13.5 million tons of arsenopyrite contaminated tailings. The arsenic in that is still toxic, but it's not in as mobile a form or as soluble a form as is in the arsenic chambers underground. As well, between the chambers, there are several kilometers of underground workings, which have arsenic and other contaminants in them too. The chambers that I've described that have the arsenic trioxide underground, they used to have permafrost around them. The ground was frozen. The disturbance from mining, among other things, has caused the permafrost to thaw. The proposal is to make what they're calling a freeze wall around the chambers, where you drill several kilometers of tubes around the edges of the chambers, and they were also considering underneath the chambers, depending on how the freezing functions. And then using a technology that's a lot like a skating rink, to use power to create cooling to make a frozen wall that's at least 10 meters thick in the rock around the chambers. Then once that was up and running, they were going to use a technology called a thermosiphon, which is a tube with no moving parts except for a gas inside it that takes heat out efficiently. And so without electricity added to that part, it can take heat from underground and dissipate it. It's temperature dependent. It depends on the climate, among other things. They need to be replaced periodically, but they don't need a lot of regular intervention or maintenance, and they've been known to work in the north well for periods ranging from 30 to 70 years. They're used at the diamond mines. You'll see some at the legislature here as well. Now, this proposal was intended to partly stabilize the site now to make it safe, but they want this to work over perpetuity, that this would keep on working forever, to use their own words, that this is, they have no intention of there being a walk-away solution here. Parts of what I've just described would require periodic or constant maintenance. And again, that is forever.
Other aspects of the site that will require ongoing care and maintenance, water treatment. No matter what we do with the site, water is going to continue to get in there, move around, dissolve some of that arsenic, and that water has to be treated basically forever. Other aspects, the tailings areas out there, there will be some kind of cover put on top of them, a mix of soil and clay, liners, and so on. Those require inspection and care and maintenance, again, forever. So the thing that's always made me wonder about this is, where is that money going to come from forever to make sure that this gets done? How do we make sure that we've got the skill sets, the people on site, to make that they, with the skills and knowledge to actually carry that work out, not just now, 10 years from now, but forever.
As long as I can remember my grandfather, my grandmother telling us stories how they live off the land. In the summer, they would come to Great Slave Lake. In the fall, they would make camp at the Willie Day site, and they would get ready and prepare for winter. The men usually would leave the women and children and the elders behind and go into the Bearlands. They would hunt and trap up there till about maybe December, and that would be like a cycle. Every year they would do that, but they have always lived here. The missionaries came into this area probably in about 1700s. We hear stories of them talking about when they first came here, and they were really afraid of them because they didn't know who they were, and definitely different skin color. And the elders always told us that there would be more people coming, but we were to work with them, have peace with them. Our word for non-Dene people, the white people, we call them Kwe-ti. Kwe is rock, ti is people. So the white people's name came when the first prospector came, because we remember them as a person that was looking, that wanted the rock. So they remember them as the Kwe-ti. So they're called rock people to this day.
This is Yellowknife, where the Yellowknife River runs into the Great Slave Lake, a community created by gold, being continuously changed by gold. It is no longer the small pioneering town of a few years ago. The famous Wildcat Cafe is closed and derelict. The trapper's hut is overgrown with fireweed. The streets are deserted. There is little to indicate that Yellowknife is one of the most flourishing centers of gold mining in Canada. But in the new town, all one sees are signs of prosperity. A fine modern hospital, schools, flourishing stores, comfortable houses. Some 3,000 people live here, and the future is theirs for the making.
Early on when I came to Yellowknife, I did hear stories from the elders with the Yellowknives Dene First Nation, and people like Fred Sangris, Isidore Tseta, talk about the changes that they've seen in the landscape here to their traditional territory, to their way of life. And no compensation, no public apology. And every time I hear those stories, it makes you mad, makes you angry about how we've treated our fellow human beings and people that were here before we arrived. And that hasn't really been resolved in any kind of a way. And I think for any kind of real healing or remediation to take place, those issues have to get addressed. Well, a lot of people have probably heard, or some people in Yellowknife, not everybody, but some people have heard stories about the elders saying that some children with the Yellowknives Dene First Nation had actually died from arsenic that came from the giant mine, and nobody sort of really believed those stories. I go to Ottawa once in a while for meetings, and I go to the Library and Archives Canada and look up some records. So there was an inquest held into the death of a child. The family got compensated by the company $750. There's a letter about that in the records. The compensation came at the urging of the government. Doesn't seem like a lot of money to me, maybe even in 1950-51 when this happened. There may have been other deaths, and certainly the Yellowknives talk about other people getting sick from the arsenic. And this was a time when there was like 7,400 kilograms of arsenic trioxide going up the stack every single day before they installed any pollution control equipment in 1951. So first 3 years of this mine's operation, everything went up the stack. All the snow, the soil in Yellowknife got contaminated. So, you know, how can you compensate for the loss of a child and the destruction of your territory? That hasn't happened. It hasn't been addressed, and until that's addressed, I don't think we can really have any kind of closure or proper healing.
how can you compensate for a life, that is lost? People need to tell the truth to what really happened to these people and their children. I feel so sad and angry at the same time because of what happened to our land that was so important to our people. It was just taken without any consultation. They didn't say they were going to do this. They just took over and started building and building and building. Even Yellowknife, the city, they think they own all this land and they're making money out of properties, and all that is happening, and the whole vegetation on that land is all dead. I wouldn't want my future generation to live on that land at all. So I think the whole land area is dead. No use.
My name is Fred Sangris. I'm a member of Yellowknives Dene. I live right in the community at Dillon, and the other community is in Deda, about 5 kilometers out. And I was raised in this area, as my father and my grandfathers, they all live in this area. This area here, giant mine, had such a big impact on our lives, even though it might have benefited a lot of people working here in the economy. But as Aboriginal people, we're impacted by it because a lot of the sediments and the bad stuff, the pollution from the mines, they come down the creek and it goes right into the back bay where we fish. This is one of the giant mine tailing ponds. Right above that is huge tailings. And we're just north of the giant mine buildings. This is where the Yellowknives Dene used to go with the dog team trail that goes over to the other side onto the smaller lakes. One day we heard this tailing broke. What we heard was the dam, the tailing walls was weak, wasn't properly built, and the tailings in the back was too much. So it forced the wall and it broke through, and the whole tailings came right down here. It was probably a big disaster here. They didn't tell the Yellowknives Dene for a while, maybe a few days later, and then they finally told people what happened here. This mud here in the water that you see here, sand, that's all tailing sand that came down. And it will probably never clean itself over time. It will be there for a very, very long time. And it's directly across from my community. So when we get big winds from the tailings going south, the tailings sand picks up and it flies over to my community in Dillon over there. We hired this young scientist to do berry studies. We wanted to know if the berries were good or no good. We got the results back months later. I was really shocked. Arsenic can be traced up to 15, 16 kilometers radius is mine. So now we're telling the school children and people, don't pick berries. You want to pick berries, go up to 20 kilometers, be safe. And that now we're forced to go that far to pick berries. Now we're going that far to go fishing. We're going that far to pick berries. We're going that distance to pick our medicine plants. Now we're forced to go outside. When in the olden days, we used to pick everything in the surrounding bays, and everything was good at one time. The mines was allowed to dump water into the bay here. DFO never really talked to us if the water was not good. They just gave them the water license. And INAC never talked to us. They gave them the mining permit year after year. I think it might have been 1976 or 75. In the early spring, they discharged a lot of the water here. And I was in back bay here by Weavers. I saw a couple of whitefish on the shoreline floating. They died. Looked like they died. So I was kind of curious. So I went around the bay with a boat. I probably counted like a few hundred fish floating on the shoreline. I reported that to DFO, Fisheries Department, and the game warden. And then they had somebody come out with a boat, collecting all the fish on the shoreline, throw them in a boat. And I thought this was going to be a big story, about the fish dying off in the bay, floating in the spring. I didn't read anything in the paper. They never come back to us and say, this is how the fish died. It was all quietly covered up. Even though the questions went, Health Canada, INAC, nobody came to bother to talk to us. We only live right there. And it's had such a devastation that I think we were ignored. We were just left alone, ignored. The team from INAC was pushing to get us to agree to the frozen state. That's not what we wanted. We didn't want it in frozen. We don't want anything here. But they insisted and insisted and insisted, and they got their way. For us, it's underground here for the time being, but we're always worried about accidental underground blast, accidental natural disaster. It could be earthquake. Anything could happen. It could be a flood underground too. We don't know. But for us, it's a scary thing. We couldn't wear our own clothes to go underground for security or for some reason, health reason maybe. We have to wear the suit. So when I'm given the suit, it tells me, well, there's something down there. It could get onto me, my clothes, and I could transfer that over to my house. So that's the reason why I'm wearing these clothes.
We're going under. There you go.
I know.
I keep trying to get that edge to the RGD's office, but they don't let me do that.
I was a little scared coming down here. My grandfather said, don't work underground, he said. I said, why, grandfather? He said, you're closer to the devil, he said, when you get to underground. He's down there, he said. Now, the only thing we're worried about is there's water running here, making its way to the creek and going on to the lake. That's what we're worried about.
So any water here that moves, we'll pick it up. We'll have a series of sumps along the way.
Yeah.
We'll take that water, and that first place that we stopped, there was a pipe that was down by your feet that had arsenic written on it.
Yeah, yeah.
That one goes down to 750.
Okay.
It goes all the way down to 750 foot level.
Yeah.
And then it goes across to the Cacho shaft.
Yeah.
And then we bring the water up from there, and we put it in the Northwest Pond.
Oh, okay.
Water from the Northwest Pond then goes to the effluent treatment plant for treatment and discharge. There's 38 openings to the surface. All those openings will be capped and covered off.
Yeah. So this whole place will be...
We won't fill up all the drifts.
Yeah.
Like we won't cement them all off, but we'll cement off the surface
the
and
entrance.
then cement off key areas, and then...
Okay. It's right behind this wall here, and probably about 30 meters up. All these pipes are going on around it, and it's freezing the whole thing in. They're telling me this is a test pipe. It's experimental, which means that they really don't know the full idea of how to keep it maintained. I was told that there are 13 other chambers like this that might have the similar freeze. So with this one is the 14th. A lot of people in my community weren't sure about it, if it's going to work or not. But I think with film, you can capture a lot of the ice here. You can show it to the community. This thing is actually working. First one anyways. Yeah, I'm amazed it's actually working. It's doing what it's doing. It's supposed to do. It's freezing. Which makes me feel comfortable. Safer, I can probably close one eye and I'll go to sleep. But still keep the other one open until all the other 13 are done. Hopefully they'll put it to sleep for good.
It took me a long time to get over a lot of anger that I had at the beginning when I first sort of realized that you can't push a magic button and this stuff goes away and we can have some sort of a walk-away solution. That's just not there. So after, the anger, you start to think about, okay, well, what is the best that we can do here? And is the plan that's the governments have come up with, is that really the best plan that we could possibly put in place? And I have to answer no. Freezing this stuff underground forever and calling that a permanent solution, as the government's plan was really all about, that's just fobbing this off onto a future generation. It's not really very responsible. I could accept freezing this stuff underground as an interim solution, but you have to have some backstops there. You have to have some investment in ongoing research and development into something more permanent. Without those sort of backstops of ongoing research and development, oversight, good monitoring, what kind of a plan is this? It's just a stabilization plan. It's not even a remediation plan. So that's, I think, what sort of really makes me want to continue to work on this and keeps driving me, and a few sleepless nights here and there or whatever, but it's about trying to make this the best out of a really bad situation.
Being next to radiation and then it's bad, right?
What we've done is we've tried to imagine ways that the people in Yellowknife and in Deda and Dilo, the Yellowknives Dene people, might be able to address the issues that concern them in ways that are accessible to them and ways that they can help to produce. So we published a report, a community report, that is meant to be a primer for people on, well, what are the issues at stake when you're trying to communicate with future generations about toxic hazards? What are the issues you need to consider in terms of languages changing over time and so on. And we're hoping, we've got a committee that's working on this issue locally. We're hoping to work with government people, with local activists and so on, people who've been involved in the giant mine issue, to develop a report on how we might communicate with future generations.
There's 237,000 tons of it down there. So there's an enormous amount of it down there, right? So the problem is, not only how do we keep it underground and how do we keep it from getting in the environment and how do we keep it from getting in our bodies, but the fact is it's going to be toxic for a very, very long time.
Well, I got here and then they gave us a slideshow for a little while, and then after that they gave us just a big table full of objects and they said get at her. So we all made our own representation, and this is mine. To me, this is sort of a representation of how it is. Like, it's just totally destroyed land, and these pipes and metal workings will be there forever because they have to keep it frozen. And then basically to just fence it off and keep it away from the good land. Like, yeah, I really don't believe in beautifying the land. I think they should show how much damage they've done. To me, I would just leave it how it is, because anyone living off the land, they would know that there's nothing they could get from this area. There's no trees, there's nothing at all, and it's going to be like that for a very long time. It's just ugly and gross, and if they beautify it, people are going to forget. They're not going to know what happened, you know. Yeah.
We don't have a lot of experience as a society in passing on knowledge, but probably the best analogy that we could find was nuclear waste sites in the US and in France. There has been some work done looking at how to preserve information about the site. It seems like the best way is to actually make paper copies of all your documents and put them on acid-free paper and store them in various locations around your country, and so that hopefully there's a record of what was done at the site, and that somebody in the future will know how to do something there. But there's other ideas that have come up too, in terms of building monuments, signage. Not a lot of work though really done on the idea of oral tradition and the role that myths and legends and storytelling could play. And I think that's something that needs some more work here in Yellowknife, because obviously the Dene have lived here for at least 10,000 years and survived quite well in spite of a whole series of adversities. But I think there's something that we can and should learn from the way that the Dene people have continued to live here, and maybe planting some seeds there in terms of storytelling and so on will help tell people in the future how to properly look after the giant mine.
Future generations have a right to the information they will need to address the legacy of waste left to them by this generation. They have a right to be warned of any danger, to know the history of their home, and to understand what has worked and failed at restoring the land to health. The Yellowknives asked for a perpetual care plan that had a special focus on communicating with future generations. Now, interestingly, at other perpetual care sites, one of the few means of communicating across many generations that worked well was traditional knowledge. For example, Indigenous or Aboriginal traditional knowledge passed from generation to generation has a high fidelity and keeps information alive in a way that written methods of recording just don't. I mean, you know, in your lifespan, you've seen the change from cassettes to floppy disks to hard drives to DVD ROMs or whatever, and now it's solid state stuff. That changes pretty quickly, but traditional knowledge endures in a different state.
A lot of the research that we've done to date focuses on this question of, say, for instance, with nuclear waste repositories, how to communicate 10,000 years in the future using monuments. How do you make knowledge sort of durable and physical in that sense? One of the kind of inspirations for this project is thinking about the ways in which oral traditions and Indigenous knowledge, which has carried knowledge from generation to generation about the land, about culture, about social practices, spiritual knowledge, etc., for thousands of years as well. And how could we mobilize similar types of knowledge transmission practices to deal with this contemporary issue, which is not a happy circumstance and not necessarily the positive kinds of knowledge that we might associate with long-term traditional knowledge and information, but yet one which is absolutely critical for these communities to remember, because they will face the poison and the legacies of this industrial development for extremely long periods of time.
The more we know about the situation, I think the more support we're probably going to get to help us create something for future generations to know, to give them that message. I feel what we need to do today, pretty soon, is to make sure that our future generation know what's down there. How can we tell them? We're trying to find ways. We're talking about it. How can we relay a message that the stuff underground is really dangerous to a point where you shouldn't go near it? We have to come up with some kind of a concept or a story, maybe, something to tell the future that it's really dangerous. And I worry that if we have it written, maybe we won't even speak English at that time, or even our own language. Who knows what it's going to be like in the next 5,000 years. I can't imagine. That's just way too far to think about it, but I think we need to tell it so that the story will be told over and over, and the story to stay the same.
If the families or the grandparents are sharing stories with their children, some children may have some memory, some stories of this place. But 10,000 years from now, there might be absolutely no memory at all. So I think the Yellowknives are going to have to work on something that's going to be there forever.
Yeah, as long as I can remember, we were always told stories, especially in the evenings where we had nothing to do. We're out on the land, and animal stories, Yamoja stories, and we learn from it. At Willow site, there's an area there that we have a story on him. Long ago, when the animals communicated with humans, and the animals were huge. And this big beaver, he made a dam right at the mouth of the river, and the people were living on each side. And the beaver made that dam, and it blocked the flow of the water. It started to flood the area, and the people started dying. And they didn't know what to do or how to get rid of that beaver. So they asked Yamoja for his help. He took a tree from the side of the river and yanked it out of the ground, and he made like it was like a shovel, I guess. He kind of scooped that beaver on the side, and it cleared the water, and the water started flowing. That's why right now there's, right at the mouth of the river, there's two outcrops of rocks like this. And they say that it was Yamoja that did that pushed the dam aside. And he took his shovel and spiked it into the ground. And now there's a big spruce tree that's growing there. And it's probably one of the biggest trees in this area.
And that tree is revered by the Yellowknives Dene. You'll see in the bark of the tree there'll be coins. There's a crucifix hanging there. There's a whole mat of litter underneath it that I'm sure if you dug down, which we're not going to do, but if you were to go down, you would find other types of offerings that predate when the first white people came into the north. So you'd probably find stone tools there. Other Dene talk about Yamoja chasing the giant beaver, and it gouged out a big trench, and that became the Mackenzie River. The story that got me really interested in whether or not there's a sort of a basis for that story. You know, can you, other than having it as a story or a legend, is there some basis in geology and geomorphology to explain this particular place here? And I think that there is. I think that at some point in the past, it may have been 7 or 8 or 10,000 years ago, there was an ice dam that kept the glacial meltwaters to the northeast of here, kept it back. So there was Glacial Lake McConnell, there was an ice dam, and a whole lot of water back up in there to the northeast of here. And at some point, I think that ice dam broke and that water came rushing down through here. And if there were people around that witnessed that, that perhaps is how they explained how that particular phenomena happened.
I think we need to come up with a story. I think that's probably one of the best ways that we'll be able to tell the story about Giant Mine is to create a story or a legend. And I think legends are created by events, I said. So this thing that's underground, the way I look at it, the way I see it, it is a giant monster. It is a monster for me. It's maybe bigger than a monster. Once it comes out, it will destroy everything in front of it. So we could take a look at it like that, like in a cloud of dust that comes out of the ground, you know, as it goes, whichever way the wind blows, that's where it's going to kill all these people. Forever in my language, we say hot'ahlon. It's hot'a means right now, and then you go hlon. Forever. There's no stop to it. It's like going out into the universe and that's it. I can't imagine that far. It's hard for me to think in that way, but it is important. That's why I think it's important for everyone to get involved and start talking about it. When we had that healing ceremony last year at the mine site, I was crying. I was crying because I was saying I'm sorry. Even though I never did it, I feel sorry for the land. You know what? Maybe we're not part of creating that, but it really affects me. I can't believe that. What they've done to the land is not right at all. It isn't right. All for the sake of money. All for financial gain. That's all it was. They don't care what they did to the land. Not like us Dene people. We really care for our land. I think a lot of times when we're working with the diamond industry right now, there's so many things we've learned from the past that we don't want to happen, to try to make sure that things are in place, that they reclaim the land and they're watching how they work on the land. So things, in that way, it's getting a little bit better. But what was allowed to happen at Giant Mine was not right. And I feel really sad that we allowed that monster there.
What lessons do we really take away from what's happened at Giant? Are we really doing mining any better now than was done in the 40s, 50s, even up into the 90s and currently today? Not really. We may think we have better technology, but our regulation, management of it, it's not even mandatory to have financial security in place for mines. There's no mandatory requirements for closure plans. What have we really learned from that? Not a heck of a lot, because we just continue on and think that what we do today with mining is fine.
It's probably the second worst mine in Canada, this place. Now remediation is happening. I was told it's going to take 10 years to clean this up. But the way I see things, the progressness of it, I guess it's not really moving at a real fast pace. It looks like it's going to be ongoing and for a very long time, maybe monitoring. After the remediation's done, might be years of monitoring going on. The community hearing, they told us monitoring is forever. So what is forever? What's forever? So fingers crossed, and hopefully they will do the right thing, the government of the day, clean it up and put it back in a safe place where we can continue to live. And hopefully that will happen. Hopefully they'll keep their promises. It's hard for government to keep promises. They break every one of them. Like this conservative government, they break every one of them. But I hope they keep it. Hopefully.
In the future, who knows if the government is going to have enough money to maintain what they're maintaining, like these thermal siphons. In the future, who knows if there's even going to be any governments to have money to maintain that. And I can't imagine, oh my God, my poor grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, my grandchildren that's not here yet. They're going to have to deal with that, and we have to somehow find a way to relay that message to them. It has to be through our stories. There's legends that there used to be monsters in there, big, huge animals. And maybe we have to start creating one or something similar. It is a monster. It's huge, bigger than a monster. Yeah. We are the guardians of eternity, forever and ever with no end. There's no end to it. And that's how we have to keep this big monster underground.